I'm Lola.
And I'm Mamuna. Together, we have a combined 35 years of experience within the tech scene in North America and Europe.
We talk about the highs, the lows, the WTFs of navigating the technology industry and answer your questions about navigating tech careers.
This is Lost in Tech.
Hey.
Hello. Here we are.
I'm so
What we got going on?
I want to talk about one of my favorite subjects.
Let's do it. What is it?
Formula One, baby.
I know nothing about Formula One. I'm going to say it out loud.
Okay. So I think a lot of people are probably in that position and they're like, why do you like this car noise thing? What's going on? Headline facts. It is the largest fan sport in the world. As no other sport or sporting league is as big as F1. And I know a bunch of people in the UK will be like, what? What do you mean football? No, football is not as big, or soccer, as the Americans would say, is not as big as F1 because it
Were
is.
you a fan I know Netflix has a show.
Yes.
Or
so let's talk about that. I was a fan before the show. I went to races before the show, but I do know that the show has been incredibly successful. We could probably deep dive into the transition of culture in F1 promotion, because basically an American company took over Formula One at a particular point, and there are various parts of it, so it's complicated. And they were the ones who conceived of doing the Netflix show, and Netflix was looking for it. And so they increased promotion, and they also brought F1 more to the US. So like the US has NASCAR and never really liked F1. Whereas Liberty Media were like, hey, we think we can turn the US on to F1. And so they started courting US fans, doing car reveals in the US, added more US races. It used to be basically just Austin. Now there's Austin, there's Miami, and there's Vegas. So there are 3 big races, made them this huge glamorous affair, brought all the celebs in, and Drive to Survive amplified the visibility of what happens inside the sport for everyone. So, but I was watching before. And I can tell you how experimental it was. In the first or second season of Drive to Survive, the top 2 teams did not participate because they were kind of like, so you won't see Red Bull or Mercedes in Drive to Survive, or actually Ferrari, I think until season 2 or 3 is when they started participating, because they were like, oh, okay, sure, we'll get in on the deal. But that isn't what I wanted to talk about. So what I wanted to talk about is, if you are an F1 fan, then you know, everyone's ride or die for their teams. We're not going to talk about which team I love because I have various. But this week, huge news came out. So Red Bull Racing is the number 1 team right now. They have won the last 3 seasons. They have the best driver in the paddock, the best car in the paddock right now. I mean, maybe people will challenge me on best driver, but they certainly have the best car. Okay. And so you put a really good driver in that car, and it's really designed around him. And he's like winning races minutes before other people, like minutes. And again, technologically, there's a deep dive there. But the cars that they have, and the cars really make a difference, right? Because the best car, usually you can marry that with a good driver and then you're going to win. And every so often, they change the rules around how the cars can be built. So this is how F1 creates competition. In most other sports, it's like a physical game, right? It's just, you know, technically football's been football since it was always football. Sure. F1 decides that this era is going to be an aerodynamic era. So they change the rules about how all the cars have to be the same in a particular way, and they allowed differences. And then it's all about bringing engineering to the table and saying, okay, how do we get maximum performance out of this car? So everyone knows about the drivers, but the real genius is in the people who design the cars, because that's where like milliseconds of difference are made. And Red Bull has one of the best, if not the best car designer in the world, called Adrian Newey.
Question.
Yes.
For a non-F1er.
Okay, go on.
Are there multiple drivers for like Red Bull, for example?
Yeah, so each team, there are 10 teams, each have 2 drivers. And so there are 20 drivers actively in F1 at any given time.
Interesting. So Newey would have been designing for 2 drivers.
Yeah.
For Red Bull at a time.
Okay. But unlike, so if you know, there are other designers who people are like, these people were amazing, but Adrian Newey has designed across 4 different rule eras. He has won 7 championships and races in every single one of those rules. So that means he's been able to design cars that favored like the aerodynamics, which is airflow around the car, and the cars have gotten longer and heavier and there's more downforce and they behave differently on corners. And he's been able to design cars that are fast on the corners and fast on the straights. Mercedes right now have cars that are fast on the corners, slow on the straights. Like combining all of these elements is like his brain is adapting to every single thing and he understands how to put the car together. And so he's a CTO of Oracle Red Bull Racing. He is the creative vision around the technology in the car. And he's leaving. And it got me thinking because, I mean, there's deep F1 lore and gossip about all of the reasons, and there's definitely drama in the world around why he's leaving. But I thought it connects to our world because I was like, there is something to be said for that moment in history when the visionary behind the way that a company has excelled leaves. And like Apple came to mind immediately. It was like, you know, when Steve Jobs was kicked out of Apple, everything went downhill. They had to beg him to come back. When when Steve Jobs passed and then Jony Ive left Apple, like nothing visually feels different design wise from Apple since Jony Ive left. I'm pretty sure that if someone tried to design square corners, they'd sack them and be like, this is not Apple. And Apple is only Apple because of Jony Ive's vision around the form factor. And I think there's a really interesting discussion there for like, what happens to Red Bull without Adrian Newey? Like, does anyone else have permission to do what he does when he decides to change how they're doing something because he can see a point in the future that they can't see yet? Do you know what I mean?
Well, it's going to take time, right? If that even happens. Because they would have to find like a protege or someone under him to have learned, and they would have trust.
Would they trust the protege the way they trust the mentor?
It depends on how he leaves, right? So if he leaves with the door open behind him to say, hey, I've worked very closely with this individual and they are like, they have absorbed my thinking. Of course, no one's going to do what he's been doing, but maybe this person would uphold the same standards. I think the thing is, you're never going to hire one for one. Like, there's never going to be another Jony Ive for Apple. There's like, these individuals bring themselves to the company.
They do. But again, it's that thing of like, what does the legacy look like? And when do you get that same injection of inspiration? Because I think very few companies,
it's going to always be different.
It's going to be different, but very few companies sustain that zag when others zig innovation culture without.
I don't think you can.
Really?
I think that, well, this may be the pessimist to me, but I think that in the beginning of a company, or not even the beginning, in early stages, and it could be a mature company that's entered into a new area that is early for them, you have more risk because there's less expectation in what you maybe can do, what you have been doing, what you need to accomplish, right? And so I think there's more room to play, define, set new like milestones for yourself. But I think once a company has found success and they're feeling it, they are less inclined to take risk outside of what they know to be true. So they may have like an innovation, like Google has a bunch of innovation labs and whatnot, but I don't think they're going to jump out and say, okay, we know this thing is not ready, but we're just going to put it out in the world. We'll see what happens. Like, they're going to wait and see, like, okay, does this thing work? Like, they're going to be more.
But I think
there's safety.
There's safety, but I think I'm imagining what it was like in the design studio when Jony Ive is working with because he wasn't a software guy. He was a form factor. He's like hardware and like physical industrial design, right? And he's working with the folks doing the iPhone. And I certainly heard stories of him having very strong opinions on software and UI elements that tied to like this strong aesthetic clarity that he had about how things should feel. You take him out and now you've got a QA process. And a QA process is a very different thing to no, you got to start again. The thing that I have in my mind is it becomes one about like maintenance. It doesn't become one about like, let's take a blank sheet of paper and let's create this idea. And I can see why a company would feel like there's too much on the line to try and do that again. But you are also carrying this legacy and this weight and this pressure. And what if there was somebody in the room who could be that for you, but you don't trust them and you don't want them to break anything and you're just kind of keeping them away from the formula, but the formula is going to stop working at some point, or the formula becomes boring,
Yeah, I was talking to a group of APMs this past week, and I was
APMs,
using my example
meaning?
of associate product managers.
Okay.
And so they were talking about their future careers, and a lot of them were like super excited about like, what does the future hold for me? We were talking through just how do we advance. And one of the things we started talking about was, or I was talking about, was that not all PMs are the same. So there are PMs that are like the pioneers, you have the settlers, and then you have the town planners, right? So you have the pioneers, who are the people who have that natural vision. They want to push boundaries. They're comfortable in the discomfort. Like they are okay. I'm going to let you come back.
Sorry, I had a coffee delivery.
No, you're fine. You're fine. But they are comfortable in the space of ambiguity, of less definition, right? And the company, in order for this to work, has blessed that path. Like they're like, okay, hey, we know that we need this investment for the future for us to remain innovative, creative, we need to push these boundaries, right? So they're willing to invest in that small team to go forward. I think companies with that mindset, who have that forward thinking, are the ones where you find the Jony Ives, Newey. Those folks have an environment to play, to innovate, to hold strong opinions, and help to form the new culture, the new standard that is that company. But most companies, especially tech companies, given where we are today, they have the security of, well, I've been in this Apple. We have been in this space for a long time. We have pushed boundaries. We found our niche. We know people love us. Like people will stand in long lines and whatever. They may not have that same pressure. Like we see the products that come out today, they're not like mind-blowingly innovative or creative.
No, and I think this is where Apple is quite different, because like Apple, in my view, have created a locked-in economy. Like I'm so deep in the ecosystem that to now introduce a different OS into my world is painful. Therefore, I am more likely than I would like to buy another iPhone and to buy another Apple Watch and to keep doing that, which is depressing for me as a human. But if there are other worlds where I think the cost of not continuing to innovate at that level is high. So F1 again, throughout the history of F1, the thing that makes it interesting is the most competitive part is watching teams win massively with designing for one rules era and then completely fail the moment that switches. So in the current Red Bull run, the previous team was Mercedes. Lewis Hamilton, who I have met, lovely guy. Mercedes were top of the stack, and their car did not make the transition from being number one in the previous rule era to being number one in the current rule era. Red Bull were number two in the previous rule era and a number one now. Mercedes is like 7 and 8. Like they are driving a truck and everyone else is driving an F1 car. So this is what I mean about like Red Bull being in this position whereby their ability to allow the second in command, and we do all know who the second in command is, a gentleman called Pierre. He's been around for a while. There's a question in my mind as to whether or not he has the permission Adrian Newey has as they take a car into the next era to do whatever it takes to keep being number one or not drop down to number 8 in the same way that Adrian Newey are. And the stakes are you only get a certain type of money when you're at the top. So the lower down you finish, the less money you earn, and it affects your fan status. there are other industries where, yeah, like Apple, you can maintain like a cultural neutrality for a while, but at some point you got to change it. So a good example from what you're describing about incubating, Nintendo.
Yeah.
Was an established company, been around for a while. I don't even know what happened, but like everyone loved Sega Mega Drive for a long time, and it was all about, and Sony was coming out with stuff.
I was like,
Yeah, old school. I'm sure a lot of Gen Z have no idea what a Sega Mega Drive is. It's fine, just move on. But when Nintendo came out with the Wii, where you could hold the stick, and they brought a completely, like, they brought grandma to the world of gaming consoles with like exercise and jazz,
running into TVs.
Zumba. They had people breaking TVs and like getting broken wrists and getting RSI injuries in their wrists and stuff from playing tennis.
Yeah.
But it was game changing. It was completely, it's like you'd always had a console and a controller, but they changed the modality of like interacting with the gaming console. And that was because they said, hey, we want to do something no one else has done. And they incubated and they put two of their best game designers basically in a hole for about 5 years and said, zag, we need And they needed to do that to survive.
Yes.
But they haven't done it since.
Yeah. But you see,
and it's like desperate times only, or like,
It feels like companies, like was it McKinsey's 3 horizons of growth, like that third horizon, there's always like a team, or there's always an eye towards 2 to 3 years down the line, right? I think a lot of companies, they make that initial investment, they hit like the lotto and win something, and they're like, oh, yay, here we are. And they forget to keep going.
Yeah.
So that pioneer team that found the Wii, that found the iPod, that found these successes, should have kept left it now for the settlers to now start to figure, okay, like what does this thing mean? How do we position it? Whatever. The pioneers have now gone forward and they just keep going for that next thing. But companies keep forgetting to make that investment. I think a lot of times, like if we think about the companies that we've worked for in the past, once they hit a certain point of maturity, they'll talk about innovation. They'll use the word innovation and investment and creativity in what they're doing. But when you actually look at the work that's being done, it's not that innovative. It's still within the confines of, we need to make sure shareholders are happy, or the board is happy, or
don't break the rules.
There are a lot of constraints. And so you can't take the same swings as you would if like, hey, go for it. We'll see what happens. If you fail, you fail. It's okay.
Yeah.
Like there's not that safety net there.
And maybe this is good, because as we're talking, I'm realizing there may be some characteristics about an organization that allow you to determine whether or not that kind of risk taking is going to be rewarded, or there's room, right? Which is like, you are net new to the game. And so all everyone has is an expectation, but there's no precedent. So you might as well, right?
Exactly.
Which is,
there's no Newey, there's no Jony Ives.
There's no Jony Ives. And this is the world where we have like the humane pin. Give it a go. You're going to try a thing. And actually, they're in a really interesting place, as we said last episode. If they go back to the drawing board with a good investor and they really look at what they broke and what didn't work,
what fell short,
they could come back so hard. And I'm rooting mega for them, because they could do something that I don't think Apple can currently do inside Apple. Right? Which is super. And it's not ironic that they're ex-Apple designers. So that's scenario 1. Scenario 2 is you have a culture where somebody right at the top can create the space for that incubation to happen, which is what we saw with Nintendo and the Wii, right? They said, I'm going to isolate you. I'm going to pull you out of BAU.
Incubation.
Continued incubation. Yeah, because the Nintendo Switch was also really interesting, a little bit more normie, but they've done something there where they said, this is about always being ahead so we don't find ourselves in a do or die situation again. Okay, fair. Then I think you've got the third situation, which is where most tech companies are right now, which is we're kind of printing cash. Everybody hates us, but nobody cares. We just need to maintain. And the innovation stuff feels really hard and risky. So we're probably going to do it in a weird way, which is probably where we find all of the AI failures outside of OpenAI, because OpenAI was in category 1. The Microsoft efforts, category 3. The Google efforts, category 3. Everyone else is kind of trying to maintain and do it a bit. and they're failing.
Yeah. Did you ever use, I don't know if I should name companies. Did you ever use Superhuman?
Oh, the email? A lot of people have good
Mm-hmm.
things to say. I have not yet used it.
I'd be curious to get your perspective.
That was the most opinionated I think anyone has ever heard. It's very clear.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'd be curious for you to try it out. We should do a conversation on it at some point.
I'm gonna have to.
I feel like I think it'd be one that people would have very strong opinions on, but I'd be very curious the types of people who find it valuable versus maybe those that don't, and it'd be interesting.
Do you know what? I actually have way too many email accounts, so I'm very open to doing some experimentation around how I maintain some of my email inboxes. So maybe I'll try Superhuman, and we'll come back on that one and see if innovation works. The question is, did the innovation work? Right? I'm guessing is
for me, no. I try to hold these opinions close, but that one, I'd love to talk about further.
Okay. So I guess maybe as our wrap up, it's like if you're an employee today and you're trying to figure out what kind of company, what kind of culture are you, like, I know very clearly I need to go work with the Adrian Neweys, the Jony Ives. Like, I'm the kind of person, I'm a magpie. I don't want to work in maintenance cultures. I want to work in groundbreaking cultures. But that's my risk-taking profile.
Rare.
Right.
It's very super rare these days for the types of companies that are in market, because you tend to see for those types of companies, they are taking on more risk. And so, like, I think balancing is important for the people who are like, because everyone comes into tech, I feel like more so right now, they're very bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. They're like, oh my gosh, I want to be the next. I'm like, well, there's balance in that, right? Like, it's not to say you can't, but you can't go to like a Google and say, hey, I'm going to break a ton of boundaries, because Google is now Google. Like, it's a verb, you know? So it's a very different space, very, very predictable space, I would say, in terms of where it is today.
Or even actually maybe not so predictable, because also, like, the reasons you came in is because you want to work in amazing products, make good money, and job security doesn't exist, right? So it's not actually that predictable of a market either in any of those senses, if you're not somebody who's trying to break ground.
That's true. That's very true. And given the jobless security, how does one who is looking to be innovative, who is looking to have a stronger fingerprint in a company, create that security? How do they create their story so that they can be rehired? So if a Newey left, I'm sure there'd be however many companies looking to hire a person like him.
There's a lot of gossip that he's going to Ferrari, which would be so wild.
If he went to Ferrari, would you become a Ferrari
Lewis
fan?
is going to Ferrari, so we're going to be doing Forza Lewis for sure. So, I mean, sorry, that's an F1 in joke. So Team Ferrari, they do Forza Ferrari, which is Italian, go Ferrari type thing. And I'm ready for the Forza Lewis because I'm a Lewis fan. And so if you get someone who I think is an incredible and unbelievable driver with the best car designer in the field at a team like Ferrari with the resources, I mean, it's very exciting. Very exciting. My phone is full of memes. I have so many F1 friends of like, the meme world is going crazy around this news and the potential that he is going to Ferrari, because the Ferrari team principals are saying it, and people are finding interviews from the past where Adrian Newey is like, I'd love to work with Lewis Hamilton, because guess what? Great car designers want to work with great drivers. And we know that the current Ferrari principal, is somebody who has a long history within the sport, and people trust him more than they might have trusted the Ferrari brand. So it's like he specifically is somebody who might be able to bring unexpected forces together. And Ferrari is the most successful team ever in the history of F1. And it hasn't been that for the last 10, 15 years. since Michael Schumacher, who I think most people will remember as being super famous.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, since he left, it hasn't really had that consistency. So you bring some powerful forces back together and you never know. The whole thing gets shaken up again. But
I feel like I know where we're going to go next.
Where are we going to go next?
The work. I'm going to be in the F1 space, just like losing your mind, fangirling.
Well, do you know what? I have found a way to combine the two because the company and industry I work in now, there is an F1 sponsorship. So like when I was in Singapore last year, I got to go to the F1 in Singapore, which again, seminal things for F1 fans. There are certain races around the world that are transformative and the TV never does them justice. And so Singapore is one of them. And I was there and I was looking down and the sound of the cars. There's a whole geek, like this is a deep rabbit hole for me. I don't know how much we want to do that on the episode, but I could talk way too much about my love of the sport, the sound of the cars, the different engine eras, the like in terms of tech, the steering wheel. Maybe I'll send you a link to something that'll do like a 2-minute deep dive. Like these are probably the best supercomputers in the world. And these drivers are going around corners at 200 miles an hour and changing switches. Like if you talk about UX, to get this thing, they're managing brake balance on individual tires, front and back. And then they're going 3 levels down and memorizing like patterns of getting to features and changing stuff while they're driving at 200 miles an hour, about, I don't know, a meter up from the ground. And one wrong thing and the car tire on a piece of grass and it spins out and, you know, but thankfully it's a lot safer than it used to be. So drivers don't die just because. But it's honestly one of the most interesting engineering sports in the world. And I got into it because you can be watching a race and the person in position 1 is not the person who's going to win. So strategy becomes the most interesting thing. You're trying to figure out, when are they changing the tires? How fast are they going? How many laps are left? Where's the tire going to wear? Is it raining? Is it windy? Is it this? Is it that? And there are all these things that you have to factor in. All these conditions. And then they're just really fast cars. And it's just amazing. We've made this show for you, and we want to hear your stories. We have our combined 35 years experience in tech. We have an incredible bank of experts to call on. We are your safe space. So send us your tech challenges and we'll help you create some draft decisions through some real talk.
You've been listening to me, Mamuna Oladipo.
And me, Lola Oyelayo-Pearson.
Edited and produced by me, Michael Bussa, with theme music by 031 Mash.
Email us at help@lostintechpodcast.com or DM us at lostintechpod.